We should be up and running. Welcome. Hello.
Hey, Mark.
Uh, hey, we have some of the Chromatic team on the call here and some other folks joining us on YouTube. So today we're going to do some show and tell, some Method Monday, talk about Tugboat, share a little bit about how we use Tugboat at Chromatic and what we think makes Tugboat a great tool. If people have questions, please ask in the chat. And we're planning on doing at least a couple follow-up episodes about maybe a little bit deeper dives on some sections. So if you have questions about specific areas that we don't get to today, as today will be relatively general, then we'd love to dig in a little bit deeper in the future. So diving right in on Tugboat, I'll go ahead and share. So Tugboat is an environment to build all of your pull requests in an automated and on-demand way. We use Tugboat with GitHub, but Tugboat integrates with other version control Git providers as well, source control providers. So what makes Tugboat special is that, and differentiates it, I think, from other tools on the market is a couple things. You might be using tools like Travis or GitHub Actions or Circle CI for continuous integration. And we use some of those tools as well. We've used all of them at various points. But the difference with Tugboat, Tugboat can do all the things that those can do, many of the things that those tools can do, but Tugboat keeps your environments around. So whereas a tool like GitHub Actions we use to build and run tests and lint our code and do all things like that. But as soon as those tests are done, that environment can and does, it is discarded. But what's great about Tugboat is the Tugboat environment that's created with a pull request remains as long as that pull request is open. So this is amazing for getting reviews on your changes. It's great for I think for other team members, but also for clients who maybe are less technical and aren't interested in checking out your Git branch and seeing the changes locally. Tugboat gives them one click to be able to interact and see your changes live. So that's number one. Every time you create a pull request, Tugboat creates a preview. And as you can see here from their homepage, they add a comment to the PR if you enable that option. And then people can click through, see the changes live. With a full database, whatever your application has as part of it, it can spin all that up. The other I think value add great functionality that Tugboat brings to the table is that it's fast. And the way that it's fast and faster than some other options, they have a concept of a base preview. So the way Tugboat works is you build a preview from your default Git branch. So let's say your primary branch is called main. You would build a preview with that. It does all the steps that it needs to build an environment. It downloads database. It builds your pulls in your dependencies, builds any theming, etc. And then once that's completely ready, it saves that state. And then, so when you make let's say a one-line change to some CSS and you create a pull request from that, it's not doing all of those steps from the very beginning. It's just doing the steps necessary to build that single change and bring it in, just like you would locally. If you're a developer and you have a change on a different branch, you know that you've made a one-line CSS change. You don't need to re-import your database to see that change. Well, Tugboat doesn't need to do that either. So that's a game changer when you can have previews built in single-digit minutes instead of many more, depending on your initial builds might be quite long if you have very large databases to import and things like that. Any initial questions from the Chromatic team? Some of us are more in the weeds with Tugboat than others. Some on our team don't have as long of a history with Tugboat, so there might be questions from all different perspectives.
Can you talk about like where we were before we started using Tugboat and how we managed? Like what has this done for us? Like how has it changed the way we do our business and the way we move code around?
So a couple different ways. I think as a developer reviewing other people's code, I think that in a best case scenario, this is all, let's talk, Tugboat doesn't exist. Chris, you request me to review your code. I'm going to go review it. In a perfect world, I'm checking out that code and making sure, loading it up locally, and actually seeing it in a browser. But I think we know that doesn't always happen. Maybe I'm in a rush and I want to be able to give you feedback, but I don't have the time to check out your code, download the latest database, build it, etc. So that would happen sometimes, but not all the time. Another scenario is for clients, less technical, clients or users. Maybe they're not comfortable, with Git, downloading databases, importing databases, building the site locally. How are they going to see it? At best, we would have a QA environment or maybe multiple QA environments where we could check out branches and see those things and say, okay, we want you to see this live. We've checked it out in this QA environment. Go ahead and take a look. But that's very limited as far as the number of environments, for instance. So you can even some platform as a service providers give you that option. Say like, oh, you can you have your site, but you can spin up multiple environments. But many of them restrict that to oh, you get 3 active environments at a time. With Tugboat, that's not the case. If you have 12 open pull requests, you're going to have 12 environments that are available. One for each pull request. So that whatever is open, it's just a click away. And whether that's the client looking at it, whether it's me or you looking at it, you can just load it right up in the browser.
The other thing that I think maybe you could talk a little bit about, which is, we work in really small bits of code that, merge against, or that are pull requests against main. But there are many organizations that we've run into clients who work this way, who have long-standing sprint or feature branches that are deployed to a QA environment or a development environment or a staging environment, whatever their nomenclature is. And what Tugboat allows us to do is have really discrete pieces of code be testable against the production database. And, this is the production environment just with our changes on top of it. So it really helps us do a much better job of deploying small bits of code, knowable the outcomes, and iterating much quicker. Do you think that's accurate since we switched to using Tugboat?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have anything to dispute there.
Okay, good. Okay.
Let me go ahead, and if there's other questions, please jump in. Let me pull up. Lost my window here.
Kind of a question, but do you want to talk a little bit about how, since Tugboat is built on Docker, that allows you to more closely emulate production to gain confidence that, what's happening in Tugboat is what's going to happen in production, kind of as Chris was alluding to?
I don't know if I want to dig in too deep on that, depending on, because that's going to make a lot of assumptions about, what production is for people. But I will say that, Tugboat is based on Docker. Tugboat does a great job of providing a whole bunch of out-of-the-box images for, go ahead and share.
I think even just like the flexibility I found of what you can set up and configure is really valuable.
Yeah, I think we might go a little bit deeper on that in the future, but just at a very basic level for someone who doesn't have a lot of exposure yet to Tugboat, I think that these are the Tugboat images that Tugboat provides out of the box. So you can imagine for many different application types with many different technologies in play, you can Lego block these together and sort of emulate, services, versions, whatever you're looking for. And beyond that, if you are using Docker in production, I'll go this far at least, or Docker images, you can pull those in here just like you can pull in Tugboat images. So you're not limited to any of these. You can configure your environments, be they, maybe you're using Docker locally, that might be even more common. You can use the same images in many cases so that you can match those between your local environment, your Tugboat environment, and yeah, maybe even your production environment. So, Tugboat provides these. This is like, these are the basic building blocks. And then I'll just show briefly sort of the Tugboat configuration, which is all YAML based. And that's how you take those items and put them together to make Tugboat go. Another great thing about Tugboat is that all of this configuration happens in code. So, when you, let's say you've done this once for one project and you want to spin it up on another, maybe there's some small changes, but once you've, made those changes and you add it to Tugboat, Tugboat looks at that repo and it's all there. There's not a whole lot of configuration that you then have to do, in the Tugboat UI. So this is an example. I've taken out a few more specific items at this stage just to keep it pretty straightforward. But this is more or less the configuration that we're using for our site. We have one image for Apache PHP. We've got a database MariaDB image, a Redis image for caching, and then we have a node image that we use to build our style guide and run some tests. So those are those pieces. And then these commands here are really the Tugboat secret sauce. This is what I was alluding to before about base previews. So these are the three most common commands related to Tugboat: init, update, and build. So these are the things that if you add a repository to Tugboat for the first time and you spin up a preview on your default primary branch, these are all the things that are going to run. It's going to pull in this image. It's going to run these steps in this order: init, update, and build. The cool thing about Tugboat, when you then make that the base preview, is that once you create the pull request, with just your small changes, it just runs this build step. So that's where you get all those time savings. It gets to skip over these other steps in the process. You can also configure Tugboat, as we do, to like update the database overnight. That's when this update command will run, and refresh Tugboat with updated databases, or a updated database. But once you have that sort of, overall workflow pretty dialed in, then, you're going to have fresh data in your Tugboat preview at whatever interval you want. We like to do it nightly. But so whatever changes have happened on the site, you see that relatively quickly in Tugboat. So you're always working with a fresh database. And when you do build those previews, they come in pretty quickly. They build very quickly, I should say. Questions about that? All right.
Mark, are you going to show like maybe a demo pull request and how it all integrates into GitHub? And
yeah, absolutely.
Was that next? Of course it was.
Yeah, I was going to show, next I was going to show the Tugboat Dashboard, just to give people a sort of a idea of what that looks like. So we've been talking about the base preview, and that's where we've marked that here. And then above it are all of the previews. These are all the previews that are built on pull requests that have been created from it. Some people end up spending a fair bit of time in the dashboard, but with Tugboat's tight integration to GitHub, there's many people that on our team and our clients that interact with Tugboat that never come to this dashboard. They're interacting with it almost exclusively from the pull request interface. So here you can see a straightforward pull request for a dependency update. If we scroll down, we can see that here's a comment that Tugboat added. And we can see that we had some automated tests run on GitHub Actions. And then we also have our Tugboat environment that was added. So here we can see that we can open that up, and then we'll see a live representation of the site on Tugboat with our changes from this pull request. So that pull request was, I forget what the correct terminology was, put to sleep, I guess. Which, if once the environment hasn't been used in a certain amount of time, it is put to sleep, and then the next time you hit it, it's gonna wake back up. So that's just the first time. And then we can click around the site, suspended, thank you. And we can look around the site and we verify that exactly what we expect to see from on this pull request, make sure that there's no regressions, and verify all of that in the browser as opposed to just reviewing the code. I had something else I wanted to mention, but I'm forgetting. Here we can see, we've configured Tugboat in this instance to have multiple environments. We have a style guide that we are also building. That may be less, that's not like the most common configuration, but that's totally possible. You can have multiple applications built within a single Tugboat preview and provide all those links in GitHub.
Do you want to touch on how Tugboat allows us to test the deployment process and not just the end result?
There's two, that was what I was thinking of. Thank you.
I got you.
There were two items, so Tugboat gives us this great way to see our changes in the browser. But on top of that, we have at least two other big things that big areas of value that we gain from Tugboat. One Adam mentioned is testing our deployment process. So we try to mirror all of the steps that we, just like as we deploy to production, when we're deploying to Tugboat. And so all those steps get run. And if there are issues, the build will fail. So many instances of that type of scenario we've caught before sending code to production. Even if it is very small changes, those builds run and we wait for them to pass to ensure that the deployment's going to go as expected. The other thing, which I feel like we kind of get for free and is sort of a sleeper hit, is that we get to test our database backup. So everybody thinks about taking database backups and keeping good database backups in case, hoping you'll never need to use them. But it's how many times have we heard a story of, yeah, absolutely, we're taking database backups, and then you need them and you go check and find out that the backups weren't running or they were corrupted or whatever it is. And by using Tugboat in this way, our database gets updated nightly into Tugboat. So, and we import our database dumps into Tugboat. So by using those, we get to verify that those are working as expected. If suddenly someone's saying, the base preview Tugboat's broken in the morning, why? Something's wrong with the database backup, possibly, or someone notices that we don't see updated data, maybe something, why is there not updated? We have new content that it's in production. We're not seeing that in Tugboat. That's a big red flag for our database backup. So we've had at least a few instances where we've caught very early on, thanks to Tugboat, issues with our database backups running or not running or running incorrectly. And we've been able to catch those issues, thanks to the assumption that the latest data is always going to be imported to Tugboat. What else you got?
So let's say, I'm just going to, play, I don't understand how all these tools work, and maybe I'm interested. Let's say I've got a repository. I work at a large organization or some organization. We've got staging environments and QA environments and all these different things. If I want to start using Tugboat, what is the impact of that? What do I need to do? What are the things? Because it's much simpler. I know the answer. It's much simpler than you think, and it doesn't have to affect any of your infrastructure.
Yeah, we definitely still have clients that for one reason or another still want to have a static QA environment. And we do that parallel to Tugboat. So in answer to your question, all you need is a Tugboat account and a Tugboat configuration file, right? And maybe we'll go into a little more detail on what we have done with Tugboat configuration files in a future video. But it's as simple as, it can be as simple as, oh, it's a static HTML site. Here's one Apache image, and it checks out the code to this directory, point Apache at that, and we're done. And it can get as complicated as, PHP, database, Solr for search, Redis for caching, Node for something else. It could it can be all of those things together. So, but all you need to really do is understand the environment that you need and define it in that YAML file. And I think more and more people are may have some form of that already, whether it's for local development or for production. So it just needs to be adapted, to make use of the Tugboat specific items. And then that's it, hit build, and you're off to the races.
So the takeaway being that, you don't have to mess with your existing infrastructure. All you're really ending up doing is adding a configuration file to your repository that it instructs Tugboat how to build itself, what images it's going to use, all those types of things. So there really is, it's very low risk. This file can live or it can go away. It's no big deal. I just wanted to point out that it's really simple to get started. And, it's as these tools have evolved, things like Ansible and, these other tools, Docker, make it really easy to do what once was really hard, which like spinning up the infrastructure and replicating infrastructure from production and all that kind of stuff. That's like a totally solved problem. And this is just like a value add on top of that, being able to wire up your website automatically to all your pull requests and have a QA environment ready to go. So,
yeah, I think one of the stumbling blocks that I can remember, pre-Tugboat, and even sometimes I've seen people that are just getting started ask about is like, it's that getting the database, part, because I think it's the well, where do I pull the database from? You need to get the database somewhere that it's accessible to Tugboat, let's say. But this is a pretty tactical thing, but it should be noted, you've got environment variables you can set secretly, privately on Tugboat. So, if you can, get a database into, anywhere that is secure, we use S3 typically, but there's many places you can put it, and then, set those environment variables in the Tugboat UI and then make use of them, and then just pull that in. So what we do again is we make use of the same database dumps that we are taking already for backup purposes. And that's why we get the benefit of, it testing those. But yeah, I think that's maybe a stumbling block for some people at the very beginning, because that's maybe not something that they've completely automated. But it can be relatively straightforward. It's not as complicated as it might seem at the beginning.
Word.
We are coming up on time in a few minutes. Are there any other questions I can answer?
Do you find any other uses other than previewing change set? So this is a leading question, but I'm sure that they're in those scripts. You showed us some of the configuration. You're just running shell scripts in there, or shell commands, I should say.
Mm-hmm. What
else have we used that for?
Well, we've run tests. Is that where you're going?
I am.
Do you want to talk for a second about some of the tests that we did?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Well, so one of the things that we've been doing with Tugboat is we're running integration tests on a few of our projects, or one of our projects. And so because Tugboat is a live environment, we're able to run tests against that live environment. So we can run like browser tests that check that certain elements are on the page or that they move a certain way. And so that has allowed, that really has upped our game on that project to, to increase confidence in our change sets. Because every time that we submit a new PR, we can validate that all these really important things are not broken. And that's hard to do unless you have a lab environment to test against.
Yes, and one thing I would note there is that, we don't need the environment to stay around for that purpose. Like we could have built those types of tests in other environments, pulled in a database, built all that. And then, like GitHub Actions, let's say. But because we already had all that in Tugboat, it was like, well, why don't we run it there? We're already pulling in a database. We're already spinning up a full site. We technically could do this elsewhere, but the barrier to entry was so much lower by doing it in Tugboat because all of that was already there for us.
Indeed.
I see a question from James in the chat. He said, as an agency, do you find that having a tool like Tugboat in your toolbox helps you in the sales process? In some ways, I would say definitely. We talk about Tugboat, we talk about our workflow and how we use Tugboat. But in some ways, it's become so integral to us that, we just don't even think about or talk about doing it another way. This is just the way we do it. As I mentioned, we do have some clients that still want to have a static QA environment for reasons. But to us, that doesn't mean that, oh, well, now we won't use Tugboat. We still use Tugboat for all of the reasons that I talked about earlier. So for sure, yeah, it gets brought up frequently when we're talking about how we work as an agency and what our typical workflow is like. Any other questions before we call it a day?
Awesome. Right on time.
Well, thank you, everybody. We are going to come up with some follow-ups for doing going a little bit deeper on the technical side, TBD on those, but I know we're thinking about one specifically on performance and how to make Tugboat even faster, especially for very complicated or big sites. But if you have any questions or feedback or things you'd like to hear about, then we'd love to hear them.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. See ya.